This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your fridge with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge. We're going to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, relationships, intimacy, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Ooh, can't help myself. Anyway, we're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up, you're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we dive in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content in Naarm, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're ready, let's flap and do this. Oh my God, is there such thing as too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever, it's my podcast. I'm leaving it in.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up a couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey gang, just before we jump into this episode, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to access my new mini course for free before I start charging for it in future. It's for people with vulvas and it's quick to complete. It's all about demystifying the female body and pleasure anatomy and getting some basic fundamentals to understand your body better. It's called Pussy Pleasure Secrets, Your Roadmap to Bedroom Bliss. You can grab it on the freebies page of my website or in the show notes. It's a great little free resource to kind of dip your toe in or act as a bit of a taster for my work. So if you've ever been curious about this sort of thing and you just don't know where to start, or you want a really quick, easy, accessible, non-threatening way to get the ball rolling and start working on this stuff, this is a great place to start. Hey labial love bugs, I'm super thrilled to have you back in the lounge today with me. And I'm very excited because we're going to be covering a topic that I've really, really long wanted to address and that I get asked about a lot. So it's a very common thing that people struggle with. And that is what to do when you and your partner have different levels of libido and desire for sex. And I've got an incredibly knowledgeable and clever guest on today to help us navigate this common conundrum. Welcome, Jessa.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Jessa Zimmerman is a certified sex therapist and couples counselor. She specializes in helping couples who have a good relationship but who are avoiding sex because it's become stressful, negative, disappointing, or pressured. She educates, coaches, and supports people as they go through her intimacy with ease process that allows them real-world practice in changing their relationship and their sex life, guiding them to become easily intimate. She's the author of Sex Without Stress, the host of the Better Sex podcast, and the creator of the Intimacy with Ease method. So Jessa knows a thing or two about what to do when you're faced with this challenge in an otherwise happy relationship. So I'm pretty excited to get stuck in. Does that all sound good to you, Jessa?
It certainly does.
So this is going to be one of the most common things that I hear in my work as well. It just seems to be, especially in long-term relationships, once that honeymoon kind of excitement and novelty dies down, that there becomes evidence of a pretty big discrepancy in desire that can become a gaping chasm where these two people just can't seem to meet in the middle. I hear time and time again things like, sex feels like a chore, it's something to get out of the way, or even pretend you're asleep so that you can avoid. I hear that there's guilt for not giving a partner what they need, or that, especially with some of the women I work with, that they're avoiding any kind of affection like cuddling and kissing because of the fear of where that will lead, and feelings of obligation or pressure or expectation to have sex if they even engage in any kind of affection or intimacy. So I know that you focus on couples who already have a pretty healthy and balanced relationship, and it's totally possible for there to just be like a genuine gap in like someone's sort of objective or natural libido levels. I'm sure that's not influenced by relationship factors, but in my experience, quite often when I'm working with clients, it becomes pretty obvious that what they feel is a difference in like a natural level of libido is actually not so much an indicator of libido levels, but is actually down to like other factors. So I was really curious to chat with you because like I'm wondering how you rule out the possibility that the difference in desire to have sex is actually due to things like the higher libido partner, you know, kind of having this attitude of expecting sex or thinking it's they're entitled to it and that it's their partner's duty, and then kind of therefore putting pressure on this or behaving as though it's like owed to them. Or, you know, some other really common ones like the lower libido partner is just carrying like a really massive mental and emotional load within that household compared to the higher libido partner. So of course they're not going to feel like having sex as much, or they feel like their intimacy needs aren't being met and they don't feel super respected or adored, or the sex that they're having is a bit shit and it's not even that pleasurable for them. So like, why would they prioritize that? You know, so there's all of these kind of, you know, like really common things that I hear where I'm like, oh, that doesn't even really sound like it's a libido issue so much as, you know, there's some very, very rational, valid reasons why you don't desire sex as much, but it's not that you wouldn't if the sex was great or if you felt respected or if your needs were being met. So yeah, I guess like how do you start to excavate the true reasons like leading to that discrepancy in desire?
I can't believe how much you jam-packed into one question, first of all. So if I can, first I want to go back and just say I have heard all of that also, right? It feels like a chore. It feels like an obligation. You know, all this stuff, worried about something is wrong. It's so common. And I would actually say not only are people likely to run into desire discrepancy, they will. It is inevitable that two people are going to have differences in libido. Because why would any two people want exactly the same amount of sex? Right. So somebody's going to be the higher desire person. Someone's going to be the lower desire person.
And it fluctuates.
Oh, absolutely. It's relative to each other in this point in time. It's not somebody has high libido or low libido. It's higher and lower with your partner right now. So somebody could have been the higher desire partner, and at this point they're the lower. Or in another relationship, they were the higher desire person, and this one they're lower. It does fluctuate. It's not an identity. But to get to the crux of your question, there's what is each person's sort of desire potential that they could have, and those might be different. And what are the obstacles that are making this worse? What are the things in the way? Because I think we have to do both things. We have to be looking at all the kinds of barriers and obstacles and sort of the traps of desire discrepancy, some of which you named, that people get into that make it worse and make somebody not want sex. It blocks somebody's sexual desire, sexual functioning, or sexual pleasure. And what can we do to foster desire? And, you know, what kind of opens that up? And that's a really important discussion between the difference of what I call proactive desire and reactive desire, or Emily Nagoski called it spontaneous desire and responsive desire. Because a lot of people think of libido like I'm supposed to just be in the mood and want it. But that's not how it works for an awful lot of people. So even when we're thinking about somebody's natural level of libido, we have to start talking about reactive desire and what's possible for people in that arena.
Yep, such a good point. I loved learning about that years ago when I read Emily Nagoski's book, and I was like, oh my God, I've got responsive desire. That makes so much sense. So it's such a common thing I teach people about, because it's a real game changer once you realize that. And then all of a sudden it's not like, oh, my body's broken and I've got a low libido. It's like, oh, my body's functioning exactly how it's designed.
Exactly.
And it's not at all about my libido. They just aren't, you know, things that are making me feel really safe and therefore providing a nice container for my arousal to unfold or blossom. Like I'm not just going to get spontaneously horny at the drop of a hat, but that doesn't mean that you have a low libido. Cool.
Exactly.
So what are...
Well, I was going to say, so many clients that I've worked with, you know, they'll come into me and say, oh, I've got no libido. And then I describe reactive desire and how you could potentially get in the mood. And they say, well, yeah, that happens. Like they totally dismiss, they don't recognize that that's a really valid way of having desire. So not only do you not have to, you know, you not only have to feel safe, but you have to get what you need, the touch you need, the time you need. It's a different on-ramp when you're starting from zero. Then back in the day when you used to come in hot, like people know what to do between 50 and 100, but 0 to 50 is often unfamiliar territory to people. So they don't understand. They need to find a different way in. It might be slower. It might not be sexual to start with, whatever it is.
Totally. And I think like, because we don't really see, I guess we don't see it modeled to us, that 0 to 50, like different kind of approach, the on-ramp. I love that phrase you used. And we mostly see modeled to us like very spontaneous, like I'm DTF immediately, like we get horny in like 5 seconds flat and all of a sudden
rip each other's clothes off and go. Yeah.
I know. And it really seems to be rewarded and glorified, this really sort of quick wham bam, thank you ma'am, spontaneously aroused blueprint for sexuality. And so I think, like you said, it just gets completely ignored. And undervalued and dismissed as though that's not a valid or beautiful way for your, desire pattern to be. But I think it's less convenient in this hard and fast kind of, like goal-oriented, outcome-oriented world. And we sometimes, I know it's quite common for women to have more responsive or reactive desire, and they kind of feel like, man, that's a bit of a bummer. I wish it was more spontaneous. I wish I could get turned on more quickly. Like, it's annoying that I have to take this amount of time and that I need these stars to align before I can get in the mood. Like, gosh, how inconvenient and annoying. Which, it's easy to feel that way in the way that this world is structured. But I think it calls on us to be more compassionate and patient with our bodies, and it calls on our partners to have a greater understanding and just put in the effort.
Yeah, there's something too. It can be a real struggle for people to ask for what they need and let that attention come to them. Not only inconvenient, but like really uncomfortable to like, people feel like a burden or something like that. Right. And they struggle
taking too long
to take the space and to take the time and to ask for what they actually need can be a burden. And then it's also complicated because not everybody, but for a lot of people, they had more spontaneous desire in the beginning of their relationship. The brain chemistry is different, right? So it's kind of hot in the beginning and it's easy. And we come in hot, we're ready to go. That wham, bam, thank you, man, works better. And with the change towards reactive desire that so many people experience, often people are thinking something's wrong, something is broken. Yeah. It's not just sort of inconvenient. It's like, this isn't how it used to be. And now it's different. So something must have broken. Which is not true, but that's where people go. And then there's this loss involved with it and fear involved with it. And they really don't know what to do from 0 to 50. Like they haven't had to explore that before. So it's like, this is all new territory.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really sad when, and especially now with like the dating culture, how it is, it's so much more kind of throwaway, and people are maybe more inclined to just bail early if they think there's something wrong with a relationship because, their desires disappeared. And I'm like, that is very normal, natural stage. That this is where you actually have to, like double down. And I'm not speaking for all relationships. Some relationships should end in the beginning, but some people might abandon ship or think that there's something wrong. Whereas, it's actually just a next kind of stage of that relationship that is kind of asking a little bit more of them. And it's sad when, people often say like, I want to get back to how we were in the beginning. Why can't it be, And it's like, oh, well, it's kind of like having a baby and being like, I want to get back to having my pre-baby body. Like, things are different and that is okay and also good. Right. Like, it's not worse or less than. It's, potentially a bit more challenging and uncomfortable. Like, a lot of women I work with really struggle to receive. We've been brought up to be people pleasing and to put other people's needs first. So it's tough for us to like ask for what we need, and sometimes we don't know what we need because, like you said, we haven't had to like learn that 0 to 50 bit yet because we've been able to just skip ahead. But okay. So what are some of the most common reasons that you find are causing couples to sort of start experiencing a discrepancy in libido?
Well, again, the discrepancy is totally normal and predictable. So there's not really a reason for that. That's just going to emerge once that initial infatuation period goes by, if they had that. But some of the things that are going to make it worse are, first of all, for the higher desire partner to take it personally. So many of them see their partner's lack of desire, a lowering of desire, and feel like this is rejection. This is about me. Yeah. This means they don't find me attractive anymore. And I mean, I get how the train of thought that gets them there, but it isn't true. It's just a thought. And if you do take it personally and feel rejected, first of all, you're not going to, it's needless suffering, right? But you're also more likely to behave in a way that's not going to be super engaging to your partner. You know, you get sulky or pouty or down or angry and resentful, whatever it is. None of that makes you a more engaging partner. And it also changes the meaning of sex, because now my partner needs to have sex with me so I feel better about myself, or so I feel better about the relationship. Now it's not, the two of us are going to this wonderful place together and sharing this thing. Now there's something to like prove, or I need to have sex with you so you won't be pouty tomorrow, or super quiet and withdrawn, or whatever. So that's that's a big trap for the higher desire person. For the lower desire person, well, both of them can feel like the lower desire partner's broken. Their libido's dropped down. What's wrong with you? You should see a therapist. You should go to the doctor. You should consider, hormone supplements, whatever it is. The presumption that something is wrong with that person is not going to help, because nothing is broken. But, feeling broken is not an empowered place to be. That doesn't make somebody want to deal with this or engage, right? And I guess another trap I see is, and this, either person could sort of suggest this, but this idea of let's just leave it to the lower desire person to initiate. I'm always up for it. You just let me know when you're ready. Or the lower desire person might say, get off my back. Let me just tell you when I'm interested. Or maybe they don't say this. It becomes like a test. I've heard this too from higher desire persons. I'm just going to stop initiating and see how long it is before my partner brings it up. The problem with this is it actually increases the pressure. It doesn't change the fact that there's discrepancy. Both people are aware that the weeks are going by or whatever. It just puts all of it on the lower desire person. So, they're trying to like reduce
alleviate
the
pressure.
They are, but it actually increases the pressure eventually. So
yeah. I mean, and some people find it really. I mean, I guess my experience is a bit skewed because I work mostly with women, but a lot of them say to me they find it really difficult to initiate. There's often underlying shame or shyness or just a lack of confidence or, knowing what to do in that situation. And then to add to that, the motivation to initiate is not there because they have reactive desire. So they're not even feeling horny or turned on or like they need to have sex. So where is this drive to like initiate coming from? It's just not even there. They can go ages without thinking about it. And then, they do feel like I've heard that as well, where they've kind of got this agreement where it's on them to initiate so that it doesn't feel like they're being pestered for sex and they're being pressured. But then it's kind of got this like underlying pressure in a different way. So,
exactly.
And in my experience, it's also usually the partner with the lower libido who feels as though it's like their fault and there's something wrong with them, and they're the ones that need to change and match the higher libido partner, because like this, this narrative that having a higher libido, having more sex is better or more healthy or whatever. And, they feel like they're letting their partners down by not being more sexually available. So what do you kind of usually suggest when there's, this kind of gap and they've both kind of done things to sort of make it a bit worse and get further and further away from one another, and now it's become this really like triggering, charged sort of elephant in the room? Like, are you working with both partners and getting them both to do things to come back to meeting in the middle? Are you usually working with the lower libido partner? Talk me through that a bit.
In my work, I'm working all with couples. So I'm working with both people, because it is not one person's problem. It is not the lower desire person who is broken or it's their fault or their thing to solve.
Hey, baby babes. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that I'd love you to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. There you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies, behind the scenes, or discounts accounts for offerings from guests who have been interviewed on the podcast. There'll also be, hopefully, inspiring, thought-provoking conversations and support from a community of labial legends like yourself. My vision for this is that it becomes a really supportive, educational and hilarious resource for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes or look up the Labia Lounge group in Facebook and I'll see you in there. And now, back to the episode.
And you are right. Most of the time they come in feeling that way and often their partner feels that way too. So that's something I have to correct. There is no amount of desire that is right or normal or healthy. It's not somebody has too much or too little. We have to learn how it works. I'm always teaching people about reactive desire and how this works because most of them haven't understood this. They have expected to feel, just sort of spontaneous sex drive and what's wrong that this is gone. So I have to teach about reactive desire. I also have to teach, and this, you something in your intro question suggested this too. Most couples approach sex like it is all or nothing. It's yes or no. We're either having sex or we're not having sex. But reactive desire needs a lot of maybe because the person is not aroused yet and they cannot know ahead of time if they're going to end up there. So it's like this idea that we can just mess around. We can be physical in whatever way. I can have input into what I might want or whatever, and let's see what happens. And reactive desire is going to show up somewhere between 5% of the time and 95% of the time, but not 100. So it has to be okay if it doesn't go to sex. And this is something both people kind of have to wrap their mind around. The lower desire person is usually really ready. Yeah, cool. Would that be okay though? And they're so certain their higher desire partner is going to be like, no, which may or may not be the case. But that the higher desire person has to understand that they can't know ahead of time. And so it can't be a commitment to have sex.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so sad when couples aren't even engaging in any kind of like physical affection or intimacy or connection because of this but I don't want it to lead somewhere and I can't enjoy it and be present in the makeout session because my brain's already like getting concerned about what's about to it's going to escalate, it's going to have to escalate because that's what always happens. Like, it's just so sad. Like, we need to be exploring ways that we can have like daily affection and little moments of connection and intimacy where there's zero pressure of it turning into anything else. And we can just get back to like remembering what that feels like to enjoy, because that leads me to my next question. Like, what are some other things we can do to nourish and nurture that like 0 to 50, that sort of I guess some people talk about how foreplay starts from the moment you finish having sex and it's just this 24/7 thing. What are some things that you coach couples to start, implementing to assist with the reactive desire partner?
Well, I mean, so first you make a good point, which is you're going to get an awful lot of no if sex is all yes or no. Because a reactive desire person is not going to say yes unless they're sure they can do the whole thing. And since they're not often very sure, they're not in the mood, they're not aroused, right? That's going to lead to a lot of no. So maybe it really helps. Like, I wasn't thinking about sex. Let's see what happens. So the way I talk about it is sex is like we're going to the playground. It's the outing that counts. It's not about what we do when we get there. It's not about we have to go down the slide. Let's just go and let's just see what we feel like doing and get inspired when we're there and see what we feel like doing next and stay as long as we want to stay. And so I'm always coaching couples to like actually have some of these experiences. I mean, I use kind of a structured exercise and things like that to just show up and focus on each of your pleasure. Think about what you would actually like, sexual or not. Ask for that. Give that to each other. Try to get away from any goal orientation or future tripping about this at all, and just sort of see what happens. And if they can really embrace that this is not a commitment to have sex, this is just like, can we be present with each other regularly? The pressure can fall away. Right. And then some percentage of the time, look at that surprise. Now I'm kind of turned on. Now I'd like to have sex. So, you end up with desire that you wouldn't have had if you didn't start. I mean, one thing I'm just careful to say to clients all the time, I'm never trying to get people to have sex. I'm trying to help you want as much sex as you can want. None of it's going to work unless you actually want it.
Totally. And I'm assuming this is something you come across and have to approach kind of delicately. But I think because I work with a lot of hetero women in hetero relationships, and basically in that dynamic, statistically, the woman is a lot less likely to orgasm and enjoy herself as much as the man. That's just like stats. And you know, it often appears like she's maybe got a lower libido, but actually she's just not wanting sex as much because it's not as worth it for her to have, and it does feel as though it's for the man. And so I was thinking, like, if sex was equally rewarding and enjoyable and there wasn't this orgasm gap, then maybe both like men and women, it would become more obvious that, because I mean, like, libido levels are actually on average the same across the board for males and females. I think it's assumed that like women have a lower libido, and that's been kind of marketed to us that, you know, we're less sexual or something. But yeah, I think there's been studies that show that on average we have very similar levels of libido. But I think it's just that like our motivation to have sex in these relationships where we're with men who, yeah, I guess aren't as invested in our pleasure or potentially just don't know how to fuck a woman in a way that feels good for her body. Like, what do you do in that? Like, do you coach them how to be better at sex?
Well, I mean, I've got several comments to that. So first of all, in my own therapy practice, when I'm working with couples or in my online course, whatever, maybe it's 50%. The men are the lower desire person. And then they feel like doubly broken because society, you know, in the ethos, right? Men are supposed to always want sex and always be ready. So both people are feeling worse about that. So anyway, it's not really gendered. As far as the orgasm gap, I mean, I want everyone to be able to have an orgasm if they want, but I also don't want orgasm to be the measure of the success of this. So there are definitely women that can have orgasm with their partner and it doesn't make them that much more motivated for sex because the whole encounter is not really that fulfilling. Like it's not, we can't equate fulfillment just with orgasm. So while it's nice to be able to have one, and I want people to be able to have one, that also doesn't quite solve the problem. We need to figure out what makes this encounter fulfilling for both people, whatever that is. Right? Is that orgasm? Is that sexual pleasure? Is that just focused attention? Is that cuddling? Whatever it is, the encounter needs to be really fulfilling for both in order to want it and in order to be motivated to have it. Right? So sometimes it's about orgasm. And the other thing I just wanted to say that, a sex life you're describing has been co-created by both people. It's not just the men who don't know or don't care or something. Lots of my clients really care about their partner's pleasure, but the partner doesn't take that space or doesn't know what they want, or the two of them don't know how to talk about this openly, or they've gone along for years together in a way where sex has been for one person. And again, it's not that often in my experience that this, let's say it's a man in a hetero relationship, doesn't care about their partner, is just happy to have it be about them. Most of them really want their partner to want it, want their partner to enjoy it, but there's been some barrier to that.
Yeah. I think like with the people that I work with, one common thing is like a lack of emotional tenderness and real intimacy and vulnerability. So yeah, I mean, orgasm is obviously great and a bonus, but a lot of the women I work with not only don't often orgasm with a partner, but they don't because of a lack of this kind of emotional tenderness and this, I guess being on the same page and just being both like in that really like open, vulnerable, intimate space of like, we're both, invested in one another's pleasure. We're both beginners. We're kind of just trying to figure it out as we go. Like, and there just becomes this unspoken thing, and the gap between them gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And they're both kind of following this particular narrative, and they fall into these roles, and it's really hard to get out of those roles again because so many people struggle to even talk about sex, Well, and another thing is so many people approach this as if your partner should know what to do. And sometimes that's gendered, like the men should just know, the men should lead, the men are, but this idea that our partner should either read our mind or should be able to attune to us so much that they should know what we want. So we don't have to figure this out or ask for it. They should just know. And
I would say that's wrong. I think of it as we're each responsible for our own pleasure, and we have to equip our partner with the information they need to be pleasing to us. But that's not how a lot of people approach it. They're just hoping their partner figures it out or knows what to do or whatever. Saves them from having to speak up, you know.
Totally. I know not enough responsibility is being taken for our own pleasure. I think it's very much, there's this like, we're going to outsource it and somebody else is going to give us pleasure or provide us an orgasm. And it's just, yeah, I mean, I fully agree with you. Teach about that a lot, sort of sexual sovereignty and taking responsibility for your own body and your own pleasure and learning what you like and giving guidance and feedback based on that. And if you don't know, then figuring it out and doing some exploration, like it's a big part of what I work with women to help them discover, because they're not taught about that, often been shame and conditioning preventing them from truly exploring that and becoming kind of masters over their own body and pleasure. And then they rock up in the bedroom and they don't, you know, even if they're with the most loving, gorgeous, you know, accommodating partner, which is really common that men really want to give pleasure to their partner. They want to please you. They don't know what to do and you don't know what to ask them to do. So it's just blind leading the blind. So something that I'm curious about is we sort of touched on like one partner, you know, initiating most of the time and the other not. What do you recommend couples? Do you kind of go, hey, like let's share the load around, or let's make it so that we're not initiating sex at all, but we're just kind of doing little bids of affection? Like how do you guide people when there's just one person always initiating?
Yeah, I never want it to be just one person. So I don't want that to all be on the higher desire person to be fully responsible for it. But I also don't want that thing we talked about before where they abdicate and put it all on the lower desire person. It needs to be shared. Not 50-50 maybe, but it should be shared. And I generally, if we're talking about somebody with more reactive desire, what I want them to initiate is opportunities for sex, trips to the playground, not sex specifically, right? Don't be so outcome oriented. Yeah. So like people, you know, one of the pieces of advice, it's like, don't schedule sex, schedule opportunities for sex to be sexual, right? Because again, it's not like we can't commit like next Friday at 8, I'm going to want this thing, right? So, but I can say, let's set aside some time next Friday at 8 to be physical and start and see what happens. Yeah. For a lower desire / reactive desire person, like you're saying, they don't have the intrinsic motivation for sex specifically. They're not turned on. They're not horny. They're not thinking about sex, but they can still initiate from intention, you know, because they are recognizing that sex is important in their relationship. It's important to their partner, that they're glad when they have it. They're going to have to think about it like on purpose, which is not a bad thing, you know? So they can put alarms on their phone or Post-it notes in their closet or something to bring it to mind and make a point of initiating this trip to the playground with their partner. They're still going to be starting at 0. Or the other thing they can do sometimes is get the engine going first by themselves and then go find your partner so that it doesn't have to always be starting at 0, right? That's a nice thing if you read romance novels or masturbate or fantasize or whatever. If there's some way to like get that going on your own and then go find your partner, that's probably going to be appreciated also.
Yeah, totally. Great idea. It's always been, you know, I don't sort of intrinsically feel motivated to have sex or get horny often, but sex is important to me and I know that I enjoy it when I have it. And so even though I might forget to initiate, I'll like kind of make an effort. And obviously like sex is my whole jam. So I do think about it a lot just for my work. And I go, in a while, probably should, you know, do that. And I just think about like the fact that, but I mean, I'm very affectionate and connection, intimacy based the rest of the time. So like the sex isn't the be all and end all. It's just like a bonus if it happens. But in terms of what motivates me to initiate intimacy is like it, you know, I'm thinking not so much about the actual sex or the orgasm, but like it's a bid for connection. It's a way to feel closer to my partner. It's oxytocin on tap. It's like touch, which is a love language for me and very nourishing. It feels like, you know, intimacy in the form of like pleasurable touch, massage, cuddling, like eye contact and like a nice like deep conversation and just being very present with a partner. That is meeting a need for me that is like a nutrient, like
Yes.
food or water.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, before I launch into another line of questioning, I love to get the segment Get Pregnant and Die out of the way because I know we don't have a lot of time. Do you have an anecdote about your sex education for us?
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die.
Don't have sex in the missionary position. Don't have sex standing up. Just don't do it. Promise?
I mean, I'm a little fortunate because my mom worked for an organization that was, sort of similar to Planned Parenthood, but it was like a private, one location kind of thing. And she did sex education for them as well as counseling of people that would come in there. So she would bring home the basket with like the books and the toys and the, I don't know, the vulva or whatever, and sort of leave it there and make it available. So I came from a very sex positive household where it was an open conversation and stuff. So that was helpful. But yeah, certainly in school, it's like, don't die, don't get pregnant, don't get a STI. That was all it was. At least we had sex ed, right? So, but it was not pleasure focused. So
yeah. Oh, that's amazing that you had a mum. Oh my God. I can't even imagine. No wonder you've wound up in this line of work. That's fantastic. It's rare.
It's funny in the sex therapist world, people come from either, it seems to me, very sex positive households like I did, or really sex negative, shamed, whatever, or overcoming something really negative. And it's like those two extremes, it seems like. So,
yeah, wow. All right. So, what are some of the, this is a huge question, and obviously it's different for, every couple, but I imagine there would be some common themes and some kind of things that you usually tackle first. But when a couple comes and works with you, or if someone was, doing that annoying thing at a dinner party where they hear about what you do and they want to pick your brains and just get you to therapize them, imagine that is happening right now.
Okay.
What do we do about it as a first port of call when there's a really big discrepancy in desire? It's creating tension and a lack of connection and satisfaction in the relationship. It's become this really, delicate thing that both of us feel like shit about and don't know how to even begin approaching or dealing with. Like, what are some quite widely applicable go-to tips or strategies for couples who want to start working on this and trying to heal that chasm?
I don't know if I could get all this out in a dinner party, but basically a lot of what we've been talking about in terms of the paradigm shift, that reactive desire is a real thing. Part of the way the two of you have been dealing with this have probably made it worse in terms of taking it personally, feeling broken, stuff like that, right? They're going to recognize the kind of pressure that they've been under. They're going to recognize what I call the sexual avoidance cycle, that once experiences don't quite live up to your expectations, you start to have bad feelings about that. Of course, you start to avoid that, right? And that increases the pressure. So this invitation into, hey, let's just take the pressure off. Let's just go to the playground. Let's just see what happens. Let's stop making it mean what we have made it mean. And just go connect again, whatever that would be, in small, regular ways. Often, that's the first step, right? Can we just, again, I always use the phrase, can we just go to the playground and stop making it mean this big thing and not expect sex specifically? And most people, when I talk about this kind of stuff, they do recognize all the ways that this has gotten so loaded and pressured. And so mostly are really, really willing to embrace this. Letting it be different, letting it stop being so goal oriented, stop making it, this big deal if they're invited into this sort of new way of thinking about it.
Yeah, cool. I think taking the phrase or the concept of blue balls out of the equation would be amazing as well. It's like, well,
here's the thing, somebody can have an orgasm if they want an orgasm somehow. But it doesn't mean it's your partner's job to get you off just because you're horny, right? Like, we've got to shift that. Like, so that person can masturbate or that they can do something different together, but it's not all on your partner to do something just because you're aroused. So that is part of the conversation too.
Yeah, like, do you have to? Because I mean, it seems so outdated and like, oh, but it is still definitely a thing. Like, I hear from clients a lot, they do feel as though, yeah, if they engage in any kind of like sensual touch or intimacy, not only are they kind of like, I guess, already anticipating where that's going to lead or worried about escalation, but they are already feeling guilty because if they start something that they quote unquote can't finish, their partner kind of makes them feel a bit guilty or like, well, why did you get me all revved up if you're not going to, finish the job or something?
I mean, that partner needs a new freaking attitude because that sort of entitlement is unworkable. And again, when I'm working with couples, I almost never see that. Mostly these higher desire partners want their partner to want to be intimate with them and they want their partner to have pleasure. I mean, they might struggle with, get around. I mean, maybe I don't know. Most of them, I suppose, masturbate, but some of them aren't used to doing anything but like we either have sex or we don't. It can be this adjustment. But if somebody's going to put that on you, that you got me aroused, you can't leave me like this. I mean, that's manipulative and coercive, and you can't have healthy sex in that kind of container.
Right.
But again, most high desire partners recognize that this is not helping their partner want it. It's feeding the avoidance that they maybe have been entitled in a way that they shouldn't. And they can take a little more responsibility for their own orgasm in that situation. I mean, again, 99% of the time I find people willing to shift that if that's ever been there. But again, I'm seeing couples that are in pretty committed relationships. So maybe it's a little bit of a different subset if you're talking to people who are just dating. But if that person wouldn't adjust that attitude, if they're dating, I wouldn't stay long. That's not workable.
Excuse this quick interruption. I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab. And the more people who get to hear it, the more people I can help with it. Reviews and ratings actually do make a big difference to this little independent podcaster. And it's really easy to just quickly show your support by taking that simple act of either leaving 5 stars for the show on Spotify or even better, writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're a real overachiever, you can do them both. That would be mad. If you're writing a review, though, just be sure to use G-rated words because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't make it through the gates. Lame. Anyway, I would personally recommend doing that right now while you remember, just to get on top of it and let me know you're with me on this journey. Thanks, gang. Enjoy the rest of the epi. Yeah, totally agree. And I suppose, the couples that are coming to work with you are committed and they're invested in working on this or they wouldn't be hiring you. So, perhaps you don't have to deal with as many of those kind of drop kicks as I have to hear about through the clients that I work with. And so often I just really wish I could scream, dump him, but I can't do that. So we're talking about the higher libido partner often feeling rejected or taking it personally, and even from them initiating and getting a no, or from the other partner just not initiating. It makes them feel like they're not desired, and obviously everyone wants to feel desired. They want to feel like you're wanting to engage with them like this. So what advice do you give couples on how to say no and receive no in a healthy way? Because I think a lot of us really struggle with, I guess, just boundaries and communication that can be done in a really kind, gentle way that doesn't feel like a personal rejection, and then also how to receive no in a way where you don't take it personally and see it as rejection, but you see it for what it actually is.
Right.
Where do you do you work with people on that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do. So first of all, remember there's maybe. And that's just really, really important. So a couple will have come in and it's been always yes or no. And the idea of, well, maybe I wasn't thinking about sex, let's see what happens, helps a lot. You don't need no very often. I mean, you might need a no eventually. You go to the playground and now I'm done. It's just not happening for me, for sure. But the thing and I'm not exaggerating this, people should celebrate when somebody says no.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking care of yourself. Because if we are talking about wanting you to actually want to engage with me, you can't say yes if you can't say no. And part of the couples will have come in where somebody's having sex as a chore or an obligation or for their partner's needs for sometimes for decades, years, whatever. And that's not sustainable. You know, they've gone along with it for too long and they need to say no. And usually both people can recognize that. So if somebody says no, wow, they're starting to actually think about what they want and let you know that. Hallelujah. Right. So, that's a real shift for people, but it's really, really important. And you combine that with just lots more maybe, instead of no, like, let's start and see what happens with this whole concept of reactive desire. And all of a sudden it's not so weighty, it doesn't happen 9 times out of 10 or whatever.
Totally. Yeah. Because if, I think so many people would be saying no more of the time because they didn't realize because maybe hasn't been an option in their dynamic.
Exactly.
Whereas if maybe is an option, it's like, oh, wow, like I'm open to it, or I'm open to being open to it escalating, but not feeling, as though a kiss is a contract, to quote, was it Flight of the Conchords song or something?
Oh, I don't even know.
Not feeling, oh, it's great. It's like a kiss is not a contract. Just because I kiss you doesn't mean we're going to go the whole way.
Right.
And I think that, if you to kind of take that obligation or expectation off the table and allow for the room for the maybes and the room for the possibility that it will, eventuate into something more, but that there's not going to be like, oh, but you've given me blue balls, or like, oh, but, my pleasure is your responsibility to provide to me. So what the fuck? If you just get rid of all of that and we're on the same page about like, we're engaging for the reasons of connection and intimacy and pleasure, not an end goal of orgasm or some sort of release or gratification, then, anything is a bonus, and you're just like exploring together.
Anything you do is got value, right?
Yeah. And I loved what you said about, and it's the case with everything, not just sex, but if you aren't able to say no, I feel deeply uncomfortable when I'm with someone who's so people pleasing and so lax with their boundaries and so unable to say no that I can't trust their yes. Because if I know that they struggle to say no and that they've got this tendency to kind of put other people before them, and they feel uncomfortable with conflict, or they feel uncomfortable to a really common one is they don't like letting people down or disappointing people. That makes me feel unsafe and can't enjoy when they're saying yes, because I'm like, but is it a real yes, or is it just an inability to say no?
Exactly. And especially when you add that for a couple who can see that over these years, somebody's inability to say no or going along with it or just doing it for their partner, the damage that's caused and the place that it's brought them, most people really embrace this again. Like, yes, please say no when you don't want to, so that I know you mean it when you do.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Well, do you have a TMI story for us? Because it is time for the segment TMI. We love it.
TMI, we love it. TMI, we love it.
I do. You mentioned pretending to be asleep, and that is a moment I had. So, I'm not sure where to start. Like, after the birth of my first child, I had 3rd-degree tears in that birth, and sex hurt after that, for years until my next baby. And I felt, I don't even know how to put this in words. I felt like fundamentally broken or damaged. Like, I'd always enjoyed sex. I was a super, sex positive person. I really enjoyed sex. I had fun with it. And all of a sudden it hurt. And I just felt like something had been destroyed. I don't have the words for it, and then we add on a lot of the things we're talking about in the way we dealt with sex, and all kinds of things were going on in my relationship. But I did get to the point where I was pretending to be asleep when my husband would come in, and it wasn't just about the pain. It was about the avoidance of this whole thing and how heavy and stuck and broken and ashamed and guilty that I felt. And that was a big part of, me ending up where I am now. I mean, I did actually get divorced. I mean, it was complicated, but the sexual issues did not help. But that's part of where I went back to school to get my master's, and I'm going to work with couples and then get the training for sex therapy. Was out of that very dark place.
That.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, wow. Thanks for sharing. I feel like that story will be incredibly relatable to an incredible amount of people, actually. Because I work with mums as well, and that's a big one. I should have asked about that as well, because sometimes it's nothing to do with libido. There's these natural fluctuations, and then there's these massive life events and like changes in your body that happen, that mean as if you're going to want to be initiating sex or having sex. And I know like mums after birth often just feel so like, I hear words like, I guess like, they feel like they're like not fulfilling their duty as a wife or a partner, or they're failing their partner or letting down their partner by not being able to provide this thing. And, meanwhile, they've got this completely different relationship with their body, and they've got a newborn. And I mean, it's just wild. And that breaks my heart that so many people have experienced that similar thing to what you just described, of just feeling broken. And I guess there'd be so much fear, because you're like, is it ever going to go back to how it was? Am I ever going to heal? Is sex ever going to not be painful? Like, how do we, so yeah. And I mean, great that in this case, it was this amazing catalyst for you to go and study this and now help so many people. I mean, classic, turn your mess into your message,
Yeah, but at a really high cost. I mean, it came out of divorce. So it's like, yes, it became a message, but really high cost. And I didn't know back then there was anything you could do about any of this. So
Yeah, such a common narrative though, like people going through a really horrible or traumatic or challenging thing, and then not knowing where to go for help, and then being like, okay, well, now I'm going to create
I'm going to find that. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm figure out that path. So hopefully nobody else has to travel that road. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, my dear. Well, I know we've got to wrap up, so I'm just wondering if you have anything you would like to leave the listeners with, maybe any words of hope or advice, or maybe some ideas or suggestions that they can kind of take and run with just to get them started.
Well, I mean, I think the hope I want to give people is, assuming they're in a good relationship and you're not with one of these guys that thinks you owe them because they have blue balls. I really believe that any two people can create a sex life that works for both of them. And I really do believe that you can't fail at sex. So if you are willing to open the way you've thought about it, challenge your expectations, get more flexible and creative, change your idea of what counts, sort of embrace all of this, there's a really wonderful way to share a sex life with your partner somehow. Even with pain or with disease or sexual dysfunction or whatever might be going on, there's a way to put that together with the pieces that are working, air quotes here, into a way that could be really fulfilling. So don't feel broken. Don't feel hopeless. Keep seeking out the resources until you get there.
That was actually that was something I thought of, like, as I was drifting off to sleep last night, that I hadn't written down on my little list of the questions. But yeah, I was wanting to ask, like, is it possible, if some, regardless of like how different people's levels of desires are, like, and maybe sexual preferences and different levels of compatibility, like, is it always possible to kind of find a way to work with that? Or sometimes is it just too far gone, or there's just too, like, can there be people who just have a very, very high libido that are very hypersexual people, and then other people that are not, and then there just can't be a way to make it work? Like, what?
I mean, I suppose with desire discrepancy, if it was a really extreme gap and one person just didn't enjoy physical touch and could not find any desire, I mean, maybe that's incompatible. I mean, maybe they could do other things together, or that person's okay masturbating or fantasizing, whatever. I'm not sure. But the other thing, I guess, that can be problematic and can be hard to reconcile is if they really don't have any overlap in their erotic interests.
Yeah.
Because there's what turns us on. And if there's no overlap in that, that's tricky, right? So if somebody's super kinky and that's really all they respond to, and that is just a turn off to their partner, like, it's hard to put that together in a way that could work for both. Now, I don't see that often, because I feel like people don't necessarily get together unless they have some overlap.
Yeah.
And they don't need complete overlap, right?
Yeah.
They just need some, but
Yeah, they probably wouldn't wind up being together for years and then coming into your office if that were the case. You kind of discover that level of incompatibility quite early on, and then they wouldn't be the draw to be together potentially. Unless you, I don't know, were religious and didn't believe in sex before marriage and had no sexual experience, and then you got together and you're married and all of a sudden you've discovered that, we are so
or that person's only just coming to even be able to consider their own kinkiness or whatever. Yeah, right. Sometimes this stuff can surprise you later. But,
But generally, like even what I'm imagining is like even couples who have had difficulties with this for years and years, and they feel so broken and they feel so hopeless and have no idea what to do or where to go, there's still hope, and it's actually quite sort of simple once you start. And usually it's just that they need a neutral third party to come in and be like, cool, you guys are okay. You've actually got a really healthy relationship in many ways. Here are some tools for you and some strategies. Let's do it. Like, often it feels like this absolutely insurmountable obstacle within the couple, but then when you go and seek some professional support, it's like, actually, like, no, this is totally workable.
And that's what's become my intimacy with these method, really, is sort of this training and accessing desire, removing the pressure, and then what do you do together to co-create this enjoyment? And yes, there are tools, there are strategies, there is hope. As long as, it's basically you love each other, you respect each other, there's goodwill. It's workable.
Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. And I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later. Yeah. All right, amazing. Well, I'm going to put the links to Intimacy with Ease method and all of your work in the show notes. You've also got a book. So if people want to delve a bit deeper, this is obviously a big topic. Definitely get into some of those resources that I'll link. And follow Jessa's work. Thank you so much, though, for this chat, my dear.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was delightful.
And that's it, darling hearts. Thanks for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. If you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that's a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism, and you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify and destigmatize with this here podcast. I'm also always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, questions or guest suggestions, so feel free to get in touch via my website or over on Insta. You can also send me in TMI stories to be shared anonymously on the pod. My handle is FreyaGraff_the Labia Lounge, if my account hasn't been deleted for being too sex positive, which, is always a possibility with censorship. But just in case the chronic censorship finally does obliterate my social channels, I'd highly recommend going and joining my mailing list and snagging yourself some fun freebies for the trouble at www.freyagraff.com/freebies. Anyway, later, labial legends. See you next time.